All right, we back in here. You already know who it is. I'm on Asharenu once again. All right. Now I apologize ahead of time. It's a lot of background noise, so I got the headphones in. So hopefully that kind of mask it. But we're gonna get straight into it nonetheless. So today we're going to be talking about the divine masculine and the divine feminine. All right. So, without further ado, let's get everything right here. Okay. All right. Let's turn this way. What's up, Maria? Let me make sure y'all can see the skull. Y'all already know. Hold on. What's up, Marvin and Magi? Hold on. Y'all gotta make sure we see the skull. Hold on. Let me scoot over a little bit so y'all can see it. What's up, Sierra? What's up, Anthony? I appreciate that, homie. You already know. All right, hold on. Again, let me kind of turn this way so y'all get a good view. Good view. All right. Let me put this lighter down. Okay. What's up, Moon Spirit? All right. So let's get into today's lesson. So hopefully everybody's keeping up. Again, hopefully everybody's keeping up because all of these lessons are intertwined. So best believe. Now today we're talking about the divine masculine and the divine feminine. Now the divine masculine and the divine feminine have 3 stages that they go through, and we're going to describe each of the 3 stages from each perspective. And I have some tarot cards to illustrate the divine masculine in its various stages, and I have tarot cards to illustrate the divine feminine in its various stages. So hopefully we're going to put everything together, in a big gumbo, and make sense out of the madness. All right. So I know I called this the divine masculine and the divine feminine, but we're going to reverse it. We're going to talk about the divine feminine first, right? Well, let me define what the divine feminine and the divine masculine is beforehand, just for the people who may not be familiar with solid foundation. The divine masculine and the divine. Well, let me define what the divine feminine and the divine masculine is beforehand, just for the people who may not be familiar. This pretty much represents for the masculine, it represents embodying the feminine side. For the feminine, it represents embodying the masculine. Right? So we have these stages taking place on the earthly plane or terrestrial plane as well as the celestial plane. So we have these dynamics going on all at once. So for the divine masculine, so for example, like somebody, a male or a man, for him to be a divine masculine, it's not for him to necessarily embody his masculine side. It's for him to embody the feminine side, right? That's what makes it divine, and vice versa for the divine feminine to embody her masculinity, right, and make it holistic, right? So it's not necessarily to be one or the other. It's to be holistic. It's to be able to pull on whichever energies you need to pull on, when you need to pull on them. Sorry, depending on what's going on. But again, we're going to have the cards to illustrate this. So let's start with the divine feminine. And the card that represents the divine feminine in her initiation stage, that's the stage 1. Stage 1 is the initiation stage. And this is represented by the priestess. All right? So let me get close up. She represents the divine feminine initiate. Now, why does the priestess or the high priestess in some tarot decks, why does she represent the initiation stage? For a woman to embody her masculinity, I'll just keep this clear so y'all can look at it. Let me keep it like this. For a woman to embody her divine feminine, to embody the masculinity, it requires 3 stages. You have to become familiar with the energy. You have to be able to manipulate it once you become familiar with it. And once you become familiar and have the ability to manipulate it, now you can start to gain spiritual insight through the manipulation of the energy. So I say it one more time. All right, let me get comfortable. We have 3 stages. The divine feminine, you got the initiation stage. Stage 1, which is represented by the priestess or the high priestess. You have to go through 3 phases. Now, the reason, and I want to speak clearly again. I don't want to go too fast because it's a lot of information jam packed. As you can see, there's a lot of symbolism in the card. So, stage 1, the initiation. You have to become familiar with the energy. You manipulate the energy. Stage 2. Stage 3, you gain spiritual insight because you know how to manipulate it now, right? So you're able, you start off manipulating it on an earthly plane, then you start to manipulate it on a celestial plane. But we'll get through that. Let's start for stage 1. The reason the priestess represents the initiation phase for a woman, because the priestess represents purity. The Virgin Mary, right? The Virgin Mary, Mary Magdalene, right? This represents light in its purest form, right? The priestess represents light in its purest form. So you can say the light is the veil for the soul. The priestess represents the soul. So when you see this brilliance, when you gaze upon this card and you see the brilliance of the light is only a veil. The light is truly shielding the essence of the soul, because if we was to see the full brilliance of the soul, it will blind you. So in order for you to even make out an image, the soul force has to be veiled in light. So the priestess represents that soul force that's veiled in light, the purity. So again, let me let y'all get a closer look so I can see what I mean. There you go. So the first stage is the purification. You also see the camel. You see fruits. You see pretty much all things of the earth. Then you see the celestial woman. She has a bow. You can say that's a bow, a hunting instrument, as well as a musical instrument, right? It has dualistic attributes, right? So you see, when you embody the nature of the soul, this is to fully accept your brilliance. In other words, when we are navigating this earth plane, a lot of times we have to shield our full brilliance, because it may not be acceptable in whatever situation, whatever time, whatever place. So a lot of times we shield our full brilliance. The high priestess or the priestess reminds the woman, the divine feminine, reminds you to be pure, you have to radiate your purity. And purity doesn't necessarily mean, a person who doesn't engage in sin. We're not talking about this from a religious perspective. The purity represents someone who is true to themselves. As they say, follow your heart, right? Be true to yourself. Don't lie to, even if you lie to the whole world, don't lie to yourself. Be true to yourself. And what is the self? You can say, well, what is the self? You can say, that determines your radiance. In other words, how you define yourself will determine the radiance, or how much of your soul force you can radiate through your light, because light can be translated into information or a frequency. So you can say a woman's frequency is determined by how much of her soul force she is able to radiate. And the soul force is a masculine flame, right? We're talking about a flame. The soul force is like an eternal flame. So it's about how lit is that eternal flame, because that eternal flame is what purifies the feminine. That's step one. The initiation, the fire. You have to go through the fire. You got to go through the purification. Purification starts in the fire. That fire is that eternal force, that soul force, which is veiled in light. So the greater your soul force, the more radiant your light, the more higher levels of information and reality you're able to take in and reflect. All right? Now let's move on to the second stage. The second stage of the initiation, the utilization. So once the divine feminine has been initiated to the eternal flame, she has been introduced into the eternal flame. So she knows that I need to always be in cultivation of my eternal flame. I need to always be cultivating my eternal flame. Cultivation, 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 cultivation. This manifests as, on an earthly plane, the Empress. This is the second phase, the utilization of that eternal flame. So once she becomes introduced to the concept of it, and she starts to build it on an internal level, it's going to be reflected in the attributes of the Empress. Now, what does this mean? How does the Empress radiate that divine light? Physically, this represents a woman who is very fertile in her thoughts, as well as her physicality, her sensuality, her sexuality, right? All things physical. She's able to create heaven on earth. In other words, because obviously when we flip it to the divine masculine, which we're going to talk about after, the divine masculine is like the builder. The divine masculine builds or sculpts the building. Then the woman gives it life. The divine feminine has the ability to give life. So you can say a man can build a home, but a woman gives that home life, right? Because if there's no woman in the home, you can have a home. You can live in a mansion. You can live in, however big of a house you want to live in. But what gives that home energy, what gives that home life, is the feminine energy, right? That's what the Empress represents. She represents the ability to give life to all physical things, right? So she already cultivates life in the womb. So we already know about that, right? So we don't even need to talk about the womb, because we already know. But we're going to talk about it anyway, right? We don't want to skip over the importance of it. Because as we see, we're dealing with Venus. You see the symbol of Venus right here. That's the symbol of Venus. So if you see the symbol of Venus, you see there's a line that goes up into the womb, and you see it's a cross. It's a line with a little cross, and you see the womb. You can say the little cross is where the eggs are released. So once you say the woman receives the energy, or you could say the sperm, the eggs are released for either from the right or the left releases the eggs, or the egg, and the egg finds its home in the womb to be nourished. Right? So let's take it back. We start off with the initiate. The divine feminine must first be introduced to the eternal flame, the soul force. She must be introduced to the soul force. And the priestess represents a woman building up soul force. So you see she's radiating in pure light because she's building up. You can say this happens when a person chants, when a person meditates, when they're getting strictly, deep into whatever spiritual techniques they may be going, deep breathing, so on and so forth, whatever doing to manipulate their breath, to manipulate their energy. This is pretty much a repetition of that. So she has been introduced to the eternal flame. Now that she has been introduced to the eternal flame and is being reflected inwardly, so she cultivating her emotions, everything on the internal level is being purified by that eternal flame. Once she goes through that fire, once she goes through that purification, now it's reflected on the earthly level. Now she is able to produce material things, have material results, because now she has went through this purification phase. So on the earthly plane, she is reflected as an empress. Now, what is an empress in the first place? Now you see she has like a woman's torso, but the feet of a mermaid, right? Woman's torso, but the feet of a mermaid. So she's like half animal, or half creature, half human. Just like when we look at the Sphinx in Egypt, with the man's head or the woman's head and the lion's body. What does that represent? You can say the soul force, the energy that's radiating from the soul's force is so primitive. It manifests physically as the feet of a mermaid. Well, whatever the mermaid has, the fins of a mermaid, because the energy is so primitive, it really doesn't have a physical expression just yet. But when it manifests as the woman's torso, again, let me make sure I'm not confusing anybody. So I'll say it in this way: the soul force is so primitive, meaning whenever the soul force attempts to communicate, it communicates through your intuition, right? So when you have that gut feeling, right, those gut feelings, those intuitive pulses, those are the communications of that eternal flame, that soul force. So it doesn't necessarily just speak to you in words like people do. So the bottom half of her body represents that primitive force, that primitive communication. Then the upper half represents the ability to exist in this world as well. So she has that primitive intuition intact, but she also can exist in the earthly plane as well, being able to materialize things, right? You also see that she's wearing the crown. You also see the symbols of the crescent. Okay, let's go to the last phase, which is the star. For the divine feminine, the star. Now this represents a woman on the celestial plane, but active on the celestial plane. Remember, it's all about embodying that masculinity. So for the empress embodies the masculine energy by being able to produce material things. Physically, basically, you can say being able to implement her will or project her will and alter physical matter. She's able to project her will into the physical plane, into reality, this dimension, whatever you want to call it. She's able to project her willpower and manipulate physical matter so that she can materialize things, give things life, right? Whatever resources she requires, she knows how to go and seek those resources. So she pretty much has mastered this earthly plane because she has walked it. She has roamed the earthly plane, so she knows how to navigate it, right? So you can say that's equivalent to, a woman who had drove every street in her city. So let's just say, for example, a woman, she has drove every street, so she knows how every street looks. She has a visual representation of her entire city because she is driven down every single street. So she knows what's going on everywhere in her city because she has been there before. She knows what's happening on that side of town, that side of town, that. So she is the master navigator. So whenever she needs something, she knows where it's located. She knows, okay, I need to go over here, I need to go over there, I need to go over there. She knows how to locate it. So she knows how to scan her environment, locate what she needs, then she knows how to go, she knows how to manipulate the physical reality to receive it. So in other words, let's just say you didn't have money. Let's just say she didn't have money, but she needed something that costs money. So to embody the masculinity, because the masculinity is all about manipulating physical matter, projecting your willpower, and that willpower starts to manipulate physical matter, physical reality. That's how you embody it. So the Empress will go about that in a way like, okay, this costs X amount of dollars, but it's I say it like this because I just thought about a perfect example for my Star Wars fans. Everybody who has seen Star Wars Episode 1, I believe. Yeah, Star Wars Episode 1. If you didn't, then I'm going to describe the scene. But basically what happened is this. You had a Jedi and his crew, and they were, they're flying through space and everything. They needed to repair their ship. And again, I'm not describing this completely accurately, so I may be off with a couple things, but essentially, it's going to embody the point. So you have the Jedi. He has a crew. They're flying through space. They in a spaceship, so their ship needs repairs. So their ship needs repairs. They have X amount of dollars, but that country or that planet doesn't take that type of currency. So he has currency. The Jedi has money, but he can't use the money because that form of currency isn't accepted on that planet. So what he has to do, the Jedi roams around like, okay, I have to project my will into this reality, and I'm going to walk into a scenario that's going to benefit me, in other words. So for example, the Jedi just roams around the planet peacefully and gracefully, just roaming around the planet, roaming around, and so eventually he finds you can say a person that repairs ships, whatever that title would be. He found a person that repaired ships, and that person didn't accept the currency. So he said, okay. He tried to utilize his Jedi mind tricks, right? But it didn't work. So for a Jedi who normally can manipulate people's minds easily, now he can't manipulate this person's mind. So now he knows, okay, this would be the equivalent to a synchronistic moment. I can't manipulate this person with my abilities, so I have to make a deal with this person. So essentially, for people who've seen the movie, this is when Anakin had to win a race. He said, if you win this race, then I will give you the slave, Anakin. But if you lose, then, then he stays with me. Yada, yada, yada. Of course, Anakin, through many, many challenges, ends up winning the race. Through all type of hardships, was able to, because that's just represent the divine masculine. So essentially, I use that example because, as I said, for somebody who is a master manipulator, not just with the ability to manipulate minds, but to manipulate their self into situations if they don't have currency available to them. So in other words, what I'm saying is, we are always faced with scenarios where we may not have resources available to us. It may not necessarily be financially. You may not just have the right connection, to make certain moves. So it's not necessarily always financially. You just may not know the right person, for you to accomplish a certain task. So the Empress, being able to manipulate with her willpower, she learns how to manipulate physical reality utilizing her willpower. So she knows, okay, if I don't have the resources, I know how to seek those resources out and manipulate my way to receiving these resources, even if I didn't have what the people are asking for, which in this particular case may be money. You may just be working with a different currency. We don't accept that form of currency. So now you have to negotiate, right? You have to negotiate. You have to bargain. You have to make a deal. All right, I don't have the currency, but I do have this. I don't have this, but I do have this. The art of negotiation, right? So the Empress, being a leader, because again, if you're an Empress, when you have a crown on your head, right, that means you're in some position of power. So the Empress is in a position of power because she is the negotiator. So she is the one that goes before other kings and queens and people of importance, people of power. She's the one that goes amongst them and negotiates things. She is the negotiator. All right. So, like, okay, I may not have this, but I have this. So you know how to find the worth and the value in all things, beyond just the simplistic way that we may think sometimes. So when we take it to the star, the final stage of the divine feminine embodying her masculinity, we see the star. So everything we spoke about from the Empress perspective, this is what's going on the celestial plane. So the star is manipulating her reality, you can say, from the astral plane, from the celestial plane. So she's doing the same thing the Empress is doing on Earth in the celestial plane. However, in the celestial plane, there's the rules and regulations are different, right? Thoughts materialize, or things materialize a lot faster. So if we take a closer look at the star, she has abundance as well. But her abundance is manifested in the form of crystals and diamonds. So she has access to resources, but celestial resources, stardust, carbon, and you see she's reflected in her divine light. Right? So you see she's mixing. So you see one hand is mixing up this in a spiral. The other hand is mixing up the diamonds. So she's making diamonds. She is an alchemist. She is a celestial alchemist. So she's pulling these resources from this infinite source. You see this infinite source in the middle, the cup above her, she's pulling from this infinite source, the soul force. She's pulling from her soul force, and her soul force is materializing these diamonds on the celestial plane. So this represents a woman manipulating the astral plane, manipulating, you can say, the deepest aspects of herself, the subconscious mind, being able to, because in order to influence the subconscious mind, in order to program the subconscious mind has to be penetrated. All right? You have to penetrate through the conscious mind to get to the subconscious mind. That's why you do mantras, repetition, doing things over and over, symbols, because you're trying to pierce the veil of the subconscious mind. It's not just open, because if it were just open, again, reality would be completely different. Certain things are not supposed to manifest, and certain things are supposed to manifest. So the subconscious mind has a shield, and you're penetrating through the shield. So the masculinity that's being embodied by the star from the divine feminine perspective is in the form of diamonds. Diamonds, you can say, it's the hardest metal on Earth. So you can use diamond it can penetrate anything, right? It's the hardest metal of all. So her soul force is being utilized or transmuted into the hardest material and the most valuable material that we know. So on the celestial plane, you can say ether. So the same way, what do ether and diamonds have in common? Carbon. So she has to be manipulating carbon just from a celestial plane. She's manipulating the ether. When you manipulate the ether, that's essentially you moving through the stars. You star stepping. The art of star stepping is utilizing your mind, your thoughts, and projecting your consciousness into a particular star constellation. Right? You are projecting your thoughts. This is the star. So the star is a projection of thoughts to far realms, to the celestial plane. So the Empress is doing the same thing. She's just projecting her willpower to manipulate the physical world. The star is projecting her willpower to manipulate the celestial plane, to manipulate the astral plane, to manipulate the dreams, to manipulate your shadow, to penetrate through to the subconscious mind, utilizing those diamonds or that carbon, those resources that she has of abundance because she has access to her soul force. Right? So once again, let's go through the process one last time. The first stage is initiation, the introduction to the soul force. And she starts to build it from an internal level, internal building, building and building up that soul force and reflecting it on and reflecting it in the form of the Empress physically. The Empress is able to manipulate the physical reality utilizing her willpower, having the ability to negotiate, having the ability to bargain, having the ability to manipulate minds, having the ability to manipulate the resources, make things materialize and dissolve right before your eyes. The master alchemist, right? So she's able to turn lead into gold, as we say as alchemists, right? She's able to turn lead into gold. She is able to find value in things that were not of value to other people. In other words, again, she knows how to give things value. Remember, the Empress has the ability to give things life. So something that had no value, she can give value. For example, a piece of paper, you can say has no value. But a piece of paper with somebody's signature that's of importance gives that piece of paper value. So that piece of paper just by itself has no value to anybody. However, if that piece of paper has someone's signature that was of importance, now all of a sudden, you know, that becomes an important piece of paper. That becomes meaningful. The Empress knows how to make things become meaningful. How to make things meaningful, essentially. So the Empress knows how to take a regular piece of paper and put her stamp on it, put her symbol on it. Now that piece of paper now is utilized as a tool to penetrate through to the subconscious mind, which allows her to manipulate her physical reality. Why? Because all things are within. All things are already within. So whatever she's trying to materialize outwardly is already within her. She's just doing the internal alchemy. She's utilizing the internal alchemy, which she mastered in her previous stage. She's utilizing that internal alchemy to connect with those resources, her inner resources, that then materialize to outer resources. And she's doing the same thing on the celestial plane by being in tune with the planetary influences. So you can say the star is just representative of a woman who is in tune with the celestial plane. She understands the cycles of the moon. She understands the cycles of the sun. She understands time. She understands her correlation with, her emotions and the correlation with the moon. She understands herself internally and externally by observing the celestial plane and what happens. And she sees whenever there's changes in the celestial plane, those changes are going to manifest within her. They're going to manipulate her internal resources, which will, in a sense, have an effect on her performance on a physical level. The star understands this. So the star knows how to project her willpower into the celestial plane in order to manipulate it. So she knows how to transcend the planetary influence. Why? Because everything is already within her. There is the Aries constellation up in the sky, but there's also the Aries constellation within self. So the star is manipulating those internal Aries constellations, just as an example. But the star actually represents Aquarius. So let's talk more about Aquarius, because the star represents Aquarius. And Aquarius is all about what? Free thinking, futuristic thinking, breaking those chains off your mind, being revolutionary in your thought. Aquarius is a fixed sign, a fixed wind sign or air sign. So you can say Aquarius are very stubborn in their philosophies of life. All right, they're very fixed on being a revolutionary thinker above all. Like they want to think revolutionary thoughts. Not even that they want to think, they do think because they are in tune with those thoughts. They are the rebels, right? The revolutionaries, the rebels, the ones that have alternative thought because they are connected with the energy that transcends, you could say, other influences. Whenever we're dealing with the element of air, we're dealing with a mixture of fire and water that's creating these vaporous atmospheres. So now we're talking about, now you're not manipulating the fire or the water, you're manipulating the vapors. So the star is manipulating those vapors. Those vapors are the ether being manipulated from an astral perspective. All right, so there we go. Hopefully this is making sense. Now let's talk about the divine masculine. All right. From a divine masculine, the divine masculine is all about embodying the feminine principle. From a sense of, again, excuse background noise, it's traffic. All right. The initiation stage for the divine masculine is the hermit. Right? Why is the hermit the initiation stage for the divine masculine? Because the purpose of the divine masculine is to become receptive. Right? It's for a man to become receptive to the voice of wisdom. Right? So a hermit has to go into the caves inside the earth to become sensitive enough to the essence or the voice of wisdom. So let me say that one more time. The hermit has to go into the caves in the depths of the earth to become sensitive enough to perceive, as they call ESP, extra with sensory perspective, or you know what I'm talking about, ESP. Extra, when your psychic abilities, I'm just trying to use various terms. So you have to go into the depths of the earth, the depths of the caves, to become sensitive again to psychic phenomena. Right? There you go. I see you, true self. Extrasensory, what is it? Perception. There you go. I appreciate that. So the hermit has to go into the cave to become sensitive enough to the psychic abilities. So this is why you see the hermit. So his light doesn't come from the sun. He has this internal light. That's what's helping him see in the darkness of the cave. He has his own internal light. He also has a pet, a three-headed dog, which has its own symbolism. We don't necessarily have to get into the full symbolism of the card, but the card is just a representation of the initiation stage. So in order for the divine masculine to become receptive, he has to go into the depths of the earth. Right? He has to become familiar with psychic phenomena. You have to go into the dark. The divine masculine has to go into the dark to become sensitive to or receptive to psychic phenomena. What's the second phase? So remember, just like the divine feminine sparked that internal flame of the soul, you see the hermit is holding that same light in the palm of his hand as well. So the next phase is, what is he going to do with that light? He becomes the emperor. The emperor is all about law and order, right? The emperor, as you see, he also has a crown on his head. It denotes rulership. So that internal flame that was revealed to the hermit by going into the depths of the earth, as he became more sensitive to psychic phenomena, he was able to tune into, things that are not able to be seen with the physical eye. Because he started to tune into things that are not able to be seen with the physical eye, he was guided, he was divinely guided to wealth. This is how people truly acquire wealth. It's not that they're the smartest person in the world. It's not that they're just the best ever. It's that they knew how to quiet their mind and become receptive to higher ideals. Receptivity. They received the proper information that generated wealth, versus that they just was these master thinkers and they just thought so hard and they penetrated. They became receptive. So the emperor, although outwardly he represents law and order, he represents rulership, but he is truly receptive to the voice of wisdom, because it is the voice of wisdom that guides him on a divine level. So that flame from the hermit that was discovered in the depths of the earth, he started putting in that internal work, going into the dark, becoming sensitive. He put in that work, put in that work, put in that work. And he came out an emperor. He came out of that cave an emperor, being able to reflect that internal light on the external level by projecting his willpower into the earth. But he's only being receptive to the voice of wisdom. So he became a vessel for the voice of wisdom. So therefore, the wheel of wisdom can manifest through his works. So you can say all great men and all great women were simply vessels to the voice of wisdom. That's how they receive, their genius abilities and all these things. They received gifts versus like they were just super immaculate people. They received certain information and certain gifts to be able to accomplish the things that they accomplished. They became receptive. Right? Now, what's the last stage? The last stage for the divine masculine embodying the feminine principle is the hierophant. Right? The hierophant. Now he has achieved his throne status. He becomes the vessel of spirit, or the vessel of his soul. You can say his soul is the woman down here. This is his soul. His soul is unseen. What's seen is the masculine person, the old man with the beard. But his soul is really a woman. He has fully embodied his feminine principle, although his projection is that of a man. The voice of wisdom, the spirit he's in tune with, is that feminine energy, the femininity of his soul. Right? He has embodied his other half. So he is projecting. He is just a projection of that eternal flame, which is feminine from his perspective. So once again, the divine masculine starts off as the hermit, going into the depths of the earth, the core of the earth, to discover his psychic abilities. And once he made those discoveries and he started to put in that work, the great work, he started to put in the great work, he became a vessel for the voice of wisdom, and the voice of wisdom guided the emperor to great wealth and great status. He was divinely guided. All right. Again, he wasn't the master counter or manipulator. He just became receptive to wisdom, and wisdom placed him in a position of great wealth, great rulership, because he became a vessel. All right. Same thing when people get possessed by spirits and all that. People, when you become receptive to the voice of wisdom, now you start to speak divine knowledge that you yourself did not originate, but it can speak through you because you have opened up yourself to become a vessel, which manifests on the celestial plane for the man as now he has achieved his throne. He holds his staff of power. He truly becomes a woman internally, but the projection of a man. But he, on an internal level, is a woman, fully embodying his masculinity as well as his feminine. So he is feminine internally, masculine externally. Sorry. So there we go. So I gave y'all an example of the divine feminine and the divine masculine, the 3 stages: the initiation stage, the stage where you utilize it externally, then the stage where you utilize it on the celestial plane, being able to manipulate the stars in star step. So hopefully that wasn't that wasn't too far-fetched. I just want to do something different, So unless anybody has any questions, we can get up out of here, All right. But let me make sure I didn't miss any questions in the meantime. I appreciate that, demon activated. So yeah, I'm seeing a couple people saying they were in their hermit phase. So definitely, that's a form of initiation. So there was nothing wrong. Like we all go through a hermit stage to light our internal flames, to get into contact with our soul force. Because we may have lost contact with it as being so worldly, so caught up in the world, we lost touch with the soul force. So that hermit just represents getting back in touch with the soul force and multiplying and amplifying that soul force. You need to multiply it and amplify that soul force, and it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Then you are able to project it, and that same soul force you can use to manipulate physical reality. But what allows you to do anything physically will come from the soul force. You need to cultivate the soul force first. Cultivate the soul force, then that gives you the ability to do all things physical and spiritual related. So, but it all comes from the soul. It all starts in the soul. So what's going on? What's up, Michael? Again, what's up, True Self? What's up, Back from Hiatus? What's up, Phoenix Rising? What's up, Annie? What's up, Flower? What's up, Afro Pick? What's up, Brianna? What's up, John? What's up, Flacco? What's up, Jade? What is it? I'm just gonna call you Jay the Nif, Jan the Nif, or J and the Nif. What's up, Torrin's Garden? What's up, Profoundly Dignified? What's up, Red? All right. Okay. Are the DF, DM ever supposed to be in union, or just learn and grow from each other? Great question. So I'll answer it this way. Are they ever supposed to be in union or learn from each other? The union is truly within self. So we'll start there. The true union is the union within self. So as a woman, it's for you to embody the divine masculine. And once that union on the internal level takes place, then it's much easier for it to take place on the external level because it's already happening within you. As opposed to a lot of us start seeking external things when we haven't gotten fully through our initiation stage yet, or we may be through the initiation stage still learning how to work our magic physically. We may not have mastered our magic physically. so that it opens us up to that spiritual insight. It opens us up to that celestial plane, and we can start manipulating the celestials as well. And that's when things flow a lot more smoothly. Things like love can materialize a lot more effortlessly. Once you go through that fire, you got to purify yourself through those hell fires. Remember, that's why we go through hell. We go through hell to purify ourselves. The purification through the hellfire. So that's what that is. How do you go within? You have to put yourself under immense pressure. So, for example, some people do this through fasting. Some people fast. Some people change their sleeping habits, go from sleeping from 8 hours a day to 4 hours to maybe even 2 hours a day. They find a way to put themselves under some type of immense pressure, which causes them to convert more energy. You know, they may be out in the sunlight a lot longer than usual. So they're finding a way. So when you going within is basically converting energy. Right? You're converting energy. But you have an intention set so that energy is being converted. Basically, I'll say it like this. All things physical that materialize have to contain the substance within it that, which is, you can say, carbon. All things material contains a substance within it, an etheric substance. All things material have within it an etheric substance. That etheric substance can be manipulated with the mind. So you need to put the body to sleep. You need to put the body to sleep and move the mind. So that's what going within means. Just to make it simple, to go within is putting the body to sleep, going into a deep meditation, and moving your mind around. Put the body to rest, stop the body, and move the mind. Start manipulating the etheric substance found within matter. And you start to do things that way. So you start to use your mind more than your body, as opposed to using your body more than your mind. That's all it is. You're just making that shift. You use your mind more than you use your body. You want to use your body to just do things, but you're utilizing your mind, manipulating the substance within matter, and programming and enchanting physical reality with your signature. This is what enchantment is. So when you want to enchant things, you can enchant people, places, and things. You can program people, places, and things, including yourself. And you start with yourself. If you know that you can be programmed, then everything else can be programmed, because everything is a projection from within. All right. So there we go. You're putting yourself outside of time and seeing things from a higher perspective. Absolutely. You got to. You definitely have to go beyond time, you know, because manifestation takes place in a realm where time stops. When the sun and the moon merge as one. So those talking about the divine feminine and divine masculine, when the divine feminine and the divine masculine merge together, time stops and creation starts. Right? So when they fuse together, it stops time and creation starts. And that's something that you have to be familiar with on the internal level first. Because if you meet somebody with that kind of power and you have this kind of power and you don't know how to manipulate it, that's why we perfect self first. We perfect ourselves so that we can manipulate things around us efficiently, so that we don't cause harm upon ourselves or anyone else. We master self, then master everything else after. That's what it means to go within. You master self first and everything else after. So I think everybody understands for now. Again, feel free to rewatch the video over again if things are not clear. Feel free to, utilize your own tarot deck and, study these cards from an initiation perspective. So again, I've heard about the divine masculine and the divine feminine. I just really haven't heard too many people speak about it, from within the tarot perspective and within a occult perspective. So I just wanted to tie everything in and give my perspective upon this topic. So of course, I'm gonna be right back at y'all tomorrow. You know, definitely check out the links in the description as always. So once again, salute. Y'all take care.